Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for pressing play. This is your boy, David Harper, with another Life in Basketball. And today's show is titled The Forgiven with the Reconciliation of America. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is going to be a two-part video, but they are connected. The Forgiven is a movie starring Forest Whitaker and Eric Bana about the true story of Desmond Tutu running the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa post-apartheid. Now, President Nelson Mandela asked Desmond Tutu to run the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to bring on a new era in South Africa, from moving on from apartheid. The colonization of Africa and South Africa, just in general, the colonization. I can't even talk because of the subject matter. I'm trying to get all my thoughts together, y'all. Be patient. I'm sorry. The colonization of the continent, just all of Africa, was beyond detrimental and disturbing. Still is. I mean, post-colonization. Still disturbing. Just the effects. And basically, Desmond Tutu in South Africa, running the TRC, was tasked to bring South Africa to get together and move on. And the way they did it was for allowing South Africans who were damaged, abused, oppressed during apartheid to share their grievances in a public forum in front of their accusers, in front of the oppressors, the accused, basically. The accusers facing the accused. But here's the thing. For the oppressors, the monsters, if they owned up to their atrocities, they were forgiven. If they owned up to everything, they were forgiven and moved on. That's why the movie is titled The Forgiven. And it was deep watching it because I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm being honest with you, I don't know. But they made an attempt to, and they're still trying to make the attempt to steer right. Because to be honest with you, to forgive, forgive's a big word when you're talking about apartheid. It is. So in colonization, it's just forgive. But they tried it and they're still trying. And so the reason why, and just to let you know, Eric Bana played a government enforcer that's jailed post Nelson Mandela being president. And he's jailed. His character name is Bloomfield, I believe. And that's all I'm going to say. But both Eric Bana and Forest Whitaker have some really good scenes together. It's a really good movie. But anyway, where the movie The Forgiven connects to the topic of the reconciliation of America is a couple weeks ago, Glenn Beck was on CNN. And for those of you who don't know Glenn Beck, he is a conservative talking head. Basically, he has his own media company called The Blaze. Or actually, I think he's removed from The Blaze now. I think he has his own podcast. I'm not really sure. But anyway, he used to be on Fox News. He used to be on CNN. And he's a conservative personality who was on CNN talking about the Parkdale shooting in Florida and how America needs to look to Dr. King and like what he said in general with reconciling, because reconciling in a way that, hey, we love our guns, you don't like guns, we have to reconcile. In so many words. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he was saying. He said America needs to look to Dr. King and we have to reconcile because there's people in America that love guns, love the Second Amendment, and there's people in America that want to limit the amount of guns, other people in America that want to limit the amount of guns to the public. And I have to really comment on this video in two parts when it comes to that. where he got that from with Dr. King, where he totally missed what Dr. King was saying. That's number one. And number two, America reconciling. Because if we look to South Africa and what they attempted, and you look at America and say, hey, could we really reconcile? Before we reconcile in this country and have some type of reconciliation, we have to be honest. And we're not being honest with one another. Anytime we be honest, we're being honest, words like race card gets thrown out. Words like identity politics get thrown out. Words like socialism gets thrown out. Words like wealth distribution gets thrown out to deflect from having a real conversation, a real, genuine, to the bone conversation about America. You get all these titles and labels. You're playing the race card. You're playing identity politics. Oh, come on, are you a socialist? I mean, everything gets thrown out. You hate Christians, whatever it may be, whatever gets thrown out. So we really can't get to the roots of our issues. And the one thing I have to say to that is that change is definitely coming, though. I mean, history is definitely repeating itself in a different way. If you think about it, the Civil Rights Movement started in 1954. 10 years later, in 1964, you had the Civil Rights Act. In 1965, you had the Voting Rights Act. Two major pieces of legislation that changed our country. And it didn't take out the ugly, but it gave our country a chance to have some real slice of the Americana that they claim that's supposed to exist for everybody. Think about it. If it wasn't for a Voting Rights Act or a Civil Rights Act, we wouldn't have a Barack Obama. We wouldn't even have a chance at a Bernie Sanders. We wouldn't even have, heck, if you think about it, honestly, just on a personal note, I probably wouldn't be here. I mean, both my parents were able to move and work in places that they normally wouldn't be able to work in. They didn't meet on the job, but they both were going to new jobs that didn't have any black people, didn't have many black people at all. So they started working. Eventually they met. Here I am. And that's all due to the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, because if if that wasn't passed, then those jobs wouldn't be available. Hence me. So I say all that to say that change is definitely coming, because in 1955, Emmett Till was brutally murdered. And that spun the whole movement in a way. It just electrified it, sadly, but in a necessary way. And we had Rosa Parks, and of course you had, Dr. King, Brother Malcolm X. You had Medgar Evers, who was a veteran, a veteran that fought in the war, but also fought for civil rights. I mean, list goes on, and change happened. Of course, LBJ, Kennedy, countless people that put blood, sweat, and tears into this. Fast forward to 2012, Trayvon Martin was murdered. Now, a lot of people don't like to make that comparison. Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin. Listen, two young black men were murdered before their time, and their murders consisted of hate. Except in 2012, they wanted to flip racism to fear. He's a stranger in my neighborhood. Well, Emmett Till was a stranger in his neighborhood, in that neighborhood. Trayvon Martin actually lived in his neighborhood with his father. So, part-time anyway, splitting time between parents, but he lived there nonetheless. And he was murdered. Well, they tried to say Zimmerman was defending himself, standing his ground, but Zimmerman's first initial thought was hoodie, black man, evil. The first initial thought of Emmett Till was young black man. Trayvon Martin, young black man. Emmett Till, young black man. I say all that to say, civil rights movement started, Black Lives Matter started. Now, with Black Lives Matter, it gets such a negative connotation only because of the word black. It's really crazy how that is, but if it was titled something All Lives Matter or something that People Lives Matter, everybody be on board. But when you say Black Lives Matter, because we're talking about black people in the black community from the time when black people first got to this country to where we are now, yeah, so you can understand why we say Black Lives Matter. But the reason why everything is sparking off of that is because Twitter was able to bypass the media, and you have people's voices being heard that normally wouldn't be heard. Now, piggybacking off that is hashtag Me Too. No, you're having women from all walks of life really cementing their voice in this conversation, and people are going down from it. Not just Hollywood producers, but politicians, CEOs, people that could hide behind being a man can't hide anymore. And now, granted, the hashtag Me Too need to go a lot, needs to go across the board to black women a lot more, and women of color, period, a lot more. There was a sidebar. There was a women's march in Detroit where they were trying to hash things out because different communities aren't heard in different ways. Like if there's a missing young white girl, she gets blown up on the news, and if it's a missing young black girl, not as much, depending on your region. Sidebar, depending on your region. And this, I can say, I guess it's actually gotten a bit better, but black women have been abused from day. And not saying that white women or other women from other cultures aren't abused, they definitely are. All I'm trying to say is that all of it needs to come together. And you're seeing it come together along with Black Lives Matter. Maybe not in the same ecosystem, but as far as voices being heard. And now we have the gun issues. That's not time's up, but it's not again, not ever. I forget I don't know what the hashtag is for it, but this is the last time. I'm sorry, forgive me. I don't know what it is. I just know these kids are really, really making their voices heard, and they actually got legislation passed in Florida, which is impressive. In Florida, for those of you who don't know, Florida, the north part of Florida is very old South. I like to call it Old South, that Bible Belt, very, very traditional Southern South. The southern part of Florida is more like, different parts of the north. You have, people from Cuba, Puerto Rico, Haiti, all parts of the Caribbean, black, white. You have, it's a mixture. It's like, it's everything down in the further south you go. In some parts of, I guess the west part, maybe parts of Tampa, a little bit of parts of Tampa, definitely. So you have the gun issue coming along and moving, and you have these kids really, 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 really making their voices heard. You have the wealth disparity, and people talking about the amount of money that's being made for top earners, and how it's such a disparity. People aren't getting raises, and not bastardizing capitalism, but saying the capitalism the way it is now hasn't been working. The globalization, even though it's been beautiful in a lot of ways, has been hurtful and harmful in other ways. You have that conversation going on, but another conversation that is about to happen, that's about to hit really hard if you haven't felt it already, is education. And I'm not talking about higher education like free college. I'm talking about public education, K through 12. These teachers in West Virginia that are striking, and the teachers in here in Inglewood that's about to strike very soon. If the state doesn't get its act right, I'm gonna do a separate video about that. Basically, parents are being squeezed because the states aren't supporting education, and the teachers are getting squeezed because they're not only cutting benefits, they're not giving them health benefits. They're not giving them the support that they need to educate children. Like what's happening in Detroit, which is a totally different conversation. Sidebar: in Detroit, Michigan, where they have the new stadium, they use they cut from teachers' benefits in a lot of their funding to help build the stadium, and at the same time open up different charter schools and squeezing out the public schools. I have to do a separate video about that, but that is the dynamics that we're living in, not just in Detroit, not just in California, because it's happening in blue states, red states, it's happening all over the place. Education is not really being supported, just all across the board. It's just not the way it needs to be. And so you have all of these issues, whether you're talking about criminal justice system, and in the long-standing issues in the black community. You have women standing up saying time's up, #MeToo, equal pay, equal work, no more sexual harassment, no more cyber marks. You have the Second Amendment conversation in stricter background checks, and not having weapons being able to be sold willy-nilly, whether at a gun show or wherever else. And you have the wealth disparity, and you also have the education conversation. All these things combined into one is leading up to something about to happen. And the reason why I say that, because you look closely, you're having all these special elections with all these different topics on the table, and you're seeing people being basically removed from office. So I say all that because in 2012, you had Trayvon Martin. We have an election in 2020. Hell, we have an election in 2018, which y'all need to vote in. We have an election in 2020, and we have another election in 2022. So basically what I'm saying is that these cycles are 10 years. 8 to 10 years when you see it and you punch through. And it's about to punch through now. Now keep in mind, I'm here to tell you guys, there's not one politician that embodies all of these messages. And don't go looking for them, and don't go claiming. It's not claiming that there's one person that embodies, criminal justice reform to the highest extent, wealth disparity in the highest percent, the gun conversation, the Second Amendment talk as far as access to weapons to the highest, in public education, not just college, but public education K through 12. There's not one person that embodies that. It's not Bernie Sanders. It's not Cory Booker. It's not Elizabeth Warren. It's not Kamala Harris. It's not, name the politician. It's not going to be them. It's on the people to vote for the person that handles most of those things and hold their feet to the fire for the rest. Really, we have to stop looking for that one person, because it's not going to happen. And that's how we got the president we have now. Because people were looking and was disappointed and whatever, and wanted something different. And it's like, great, but look what we got. So hey, that goes to another video, which I'm not going to do. I'm going to stay on topic. We have to take responsibility into holding up all these issues and pushing it. When you have a politician that talks about criminal justice reform to a T, and talk about public schools to a T, but still connected to Wall Street and not really talking about the income disparity like they need to, you hold their feet to the fire. If you have a person that talks about income inequality and talks about free college and talks about all these things, but not necessarily criminal justice reform and not necessarily the gun control issue and not necessarily to the extent that we need to, hold their feet to the fire. But don't shun them. Just hold their feet to the fire. So understand there's not going to be one perfect person. We have to drive the narrative in the conversation, in the issues, and that's the only way it's going to happen, very much the way it did in the civil rights movement. That's the way it is. Kennedy had to be pushed. LBJ had to be pushed. They weren't the one politician. They were pushed by the people. We got to just keep pushing the politician, but we got to be boisterous. Now to the Glenn Beck conversation about reconciliation, and we need to reconcile. Oh my goodness. Okay, first of all, it trips me out how a lot of people who love to talk Dr. King, it's not just Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity loves to talk about, we got to talk about the great Dr. Martin Luther King, and we got to talk about the character, the content in somebody's character, not the color of their skin, and I'm fumbling the words, but it trips me out the way people talk. Glenn Beck's, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, whoever talks about Dr. King like, Listen, Glenn Beck and everybody else who love to quote Dr. King, if you ever bring up reconciliation again, just to let you know, Dr. King was talking about the beloved community. The beloved community, which thought and sought the equality of all people. Where wealth was shared, not redistributed, but everyone had a chance for wealth and prosperity in a way that was fair in the beloved community. Bigotry and hatred was replaced with inclusion and love for brothers and sisters of all creeds and colors. That's what he was talking about with reconciliation, the reconciliation in the beloved community, because you can only get that through love and in peace and inclusion. He wasn't talking about me reconciling your love for guns with my disdain for people having access, all types of people having access to guns. He wasn't talking about that reconciliation. Dr. King wasn't talking about having us reconcile our emotions with guns. Guns in the Second Amendment. He was nowhere near that. The love for the Second Amendment should never outweigh the love for a life. It shouldn't. Never. And we're just talking about extended background checks. Extended. It trips me out anyway, man. Reconciliation. Okay, if we ever get to a point where we're talking about reconciliation, believe me, it's going to be a lot more than just the Second Amendment. It's going to be a lot. Try to reconcile that. All right, this is your boy David Harper for another show of Life in Basketball. If you liked it, I know this was a long video, subscribe. This is longer than most, but thank you for listening. I'll see you guys later on. Again, subscribe, share, tell a friend. This actually might help them. All right, I'll talk to you all. Peace.